Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to get started shortly to let folks have a chance to dial in, give it a couple more minutes, and then we'll get going. All right, well, let's get going. Well, welcome, as I said, to everyone joining us today for this webinar. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Mission. I'm joined by Sanjay from Amazon. We're going to do more detailed introductions in a moment, but today's topic is using AWS Control Tower to govern multi-account AWS environments at scale. So let's get going. So as I mentioned, I'm here with Sanjay. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the CTO of Mission. I'm going to let Sanjay introduce himself really quickly. Sanjay, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. You might be on mute. Sanjay, can you hear me? Looks like he might have dropped. So what we're going to do is we're going to get going and let Sanjay rejoin. A little bit about myself. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I mentioned I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Mission. A little bit about me. I am a technologist. I'm also a programmer, cloud strategist, and a bourbon junkie, which is ironic because I'm currently presenting this webinar from Louisville, Kentucky, from a hotel room. But I'm very excited to be here today. I have deep experience with cloud infrastructure and cloud services as an operator, builder, and user. Sanjay, were you able to rejoin us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and let you introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. I am Sanjay Garje. I lead the technical business development for AWS for Control Tower and Service Catalog. So those are two services that are near and dear to my heart. I also do that for global and strategic segment of our business, and that doesn't really leave me any free time. But if I do get free time, I do like to teach cloud computing at San Jose State. That's one of my passion, and pretty much the hats that I'm wearing is software engineer, builder, and entrepreneur. So that really defines who I am. Back to you.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to go through the content. Control Tower is one of my favorite new services. So before we get going into the content, let's talk a little bit so we are a premier consulting partner with Amazon. We're also a managed services partner, solution provider, and we have multiple competencies, including the DevOps competency, healthcare and life sciences as well. We were a launch partner for the Well-Architected Review Program, and our engineering team is 100% certified by AWS, over 40 engineers, and we're also an AWS Immersion Day partner. So what can Mission do for our customers? Well, we're based in Los Angeles and Boston, and we have a comprehensive suite of services to help customers architect, migrate, manage, and optimize for AWS. We are 100% focused on the AWS cloud, and we help with that entire cloud journey from getting started, migration readiness assessments, road mapping, POCs, actually doing guided cloud transformation and migrations themselves, CI/CD implementation, 24/7. Sure that from a 24/7 basis, your AWS environment is functioning and is working. Your systems are up and running. We can do that for you, and we also perform optimization services to kind of make sure that you're getting the most out of your AWS environment and meeting your business objectives with AWS. So I'm going to hand it over now to Sanjay and let him tell you a little bit about Control Tower.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. So let's jump right into it. As I talk to our customers every day, right, by and large, everybody's moving into cloud. AWS Cloud is obviously the favorite place for that. And the two conflicting needs that I see is builders wants to move fast, right? We are all software engineers. We like to consider ourselves as builders, and we are just excited for the cloud, right? The innovation that it offers us, the agility with which we can build our applications and deploy the business value, right? To delight our customers with these amazing new customer experiences is really what is exciting to me as a software engineer. While that's all exciting, the other aspect of that equation is we still have CIOs, CTOs, and CISO suite, and they're also at the same time concerned, rightfully so, about cost governance, security governance, and there are various aspects of governance, right? But by and large, they want to make sure while they enable the builders to build the next amazing thing, in that process, they're not creating a situation where the builders are hurting either themselves or the company by, accidentally exposing sensitive data or doing things that just kind of not good for their business, right? And we live in the world of GDPR today. There's a lot of privacy concerns, data protection, and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're allowing your builders the right guardrails, the right path, so they can still go and get that agility and build things the way they want, but not hurting the enterprise from either security or from financial standpoint. So that's really the common concerns that we hear. And as a kind of, in response to that, what we have done, Control Tower is now really that service that lays the foundation to have both, right? As your migration into AWS grows, you have more and more teams doing things in AWS. More people are, your employees are joining, and you need to manage their access to various AWS accounts. Some people leave the company, so just overall the access management can be a big deal. At the same time, you have all these new teams and new workloads, projects that you are deploying, and they need to have, various AWS accounts for their own purposes, right? You may have dev stage production accounts for the respective workload. And as you multiply that by, dozens of teams, or, if not dozens, maybe some customers even have hundreds of teams with hundreds of different workloads, that really now expands your AWS ecosystem. And to be able to manage governance at scale across that large footprint can become challenging. And certainly those who play the cloud IT admin role, they know this from, first-hand experience. So our attempt here is to give you AWS Control Tower as a native AWS service to make your life easy when it comes to managing that security compliance best practices on day one when you are trying to get into, trying to get all those applications and teams into cloud. How do we really do that? That's what we're going to learn in the next 35, 40 minutes or so. So the whole idea is, if you look at what Control Tower provides, we can by and large divide that into three different aspects. You want to enable your teams for doing, cloud migrations, for working in the cloud the right way. At the same time, you want to give them the self-service provisioning access, so whenever they need something that needs to be deployed in AWS, they don't have to wait for like 2 weeks workflow ticketing system to go through all the right approvals. But how do you still make sure the right approvals are in the process and in the play, but they still can deliver things and get things done in a self-service fashion, right, instantaneously, right? So how do we do that? So we will cover that today as well. And then the last but not the least is the whole operational aspect of once you have things up and running and you take all this, time and energy to establish the baseline the right way, but then once you turn the accounts to the different teams and to the different developers, then they start working in it, and that may result into accidental, drift. So how do you make sure that you have the right operational capabilities in place so that way you can have a continuous monitoring, continuous compliance as well as a result of that? So AWS Control Tower is with collaboration with AWS Service Catalog and other AWS services such as Config and AWS Organization. This all works together to give you that self-service governance at scale. So if we continue to dive deeper now, right, so let's take the first look at enabling governance at scale. So that's the enable portion of it. And the idea here is that the different teams, a growing number of teams coming and using AWS resources in various accounts, they need different accounts to get going. And a lot of times, and I've seen this firsthand with many, many customers, just getting that new AWS account provision, and getting that approved and getting that through can be a 2-week-long process at certain companies. And how do you? And that's, I'm not trying to criticize that. There's certainly some valid reason they want to make sure all the right check boxes are checked. But the idea is, can you really automate all of that now using Control Tower to make sure the concerns that you had, right? Are we following all the right best practices? Is the account enabled with all the right security posture? Well, if you can enforce those best practices using automation, using native AWS services, then certainly that's where the compliance team is happy and you can still get your agility, and that's what we're trying to do with AWS Control Tower. So if we look at further, right, the governance, enabling governance piece has 4 different things. The first thing is setting up your landing zone. You may have heard about landing zone before. There was we had a different guidance on it a few years ago. That was our starting point. That was released as a result to customers' need and demand that, hey, we want to set up our multi-account, multi-region AWS footprint. How do we do that the right way? So as a result to that incoming request and demand, we had released our AWS landing zone as a lot of best practices, reference architecture, what I would call that, right? And then you had to sit there and either work with your engineering teams or partners such as Mission Cloud or AWS professional services to build that landing zone. And that could take anywhere between 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on how complex and what are the different best practices you wanted to follow and what made sense for your business, because everybody's business is different and you may have different regulatory and compliance needs that you had to factor all that in. So we looked at that and we said we can do better there. And the idea was to automate that entire landing zone process creation using something natively. And that's where we launched AWS Control Tower as a GA, General Availability Service, back in end of June 2019 in Boston as part of the Reinforce conference that we did for the first time this year. So what that means is you can set up your entire landing zone in a completely automated fashion between 30 to 90 minutes. And that's all automated for you. As part of that, it sets up a whole bunch of things which we're going to walk through really soon here. But that's a big value that you get, because if you are the, like as engineers and as builders and as admins, we have our day-to-day jobs, right? So to be able to do something in AWS, you need to make sure you are reading the right documentation, you get the right best practices learned, maybe you go through a bunch of training. So it does require certain learning curve. And what we're trying to do here is take away all that from you and just give you that one easy button that will launch that entire landing zone for you, which sets up a whole bunch of things. And we're going to look into that in a few minutes here. So that's a big value that you get out of Control Tower. The other big thing that you get, right, the use case that I mentioned already, which is new employees come and join company all the time. People leave the company all the time. So you want to make sure the right employees have access to right resources. And as the different team members start working on different projects, maybe they need additional access or maybe their access needs to shrink. So managing all that sometimes can become painful, especially when you have hundreds of AWS accounts and hundreds of employees. So the idea here is using native AWS SSO, that's the native AWS service for single sign-on access. Control Tower leverages that as part of this launch experience, and in that same 30 to 90 minutes, it's also going to launch a new AWS SSO directory for you. It's going to pre-configure that with all the right admin and security roles, which follows AWS best practices, so that every new AWS account after that is launched through AWS Control Tower will have cross-account access enabled by default, right? So it will have single sign-on access by default. So that takes away a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting from your day-to-day, and you get that out of box. And you can also work, then repoint that AWS SSO back to Microsoft AD or other solutions that you might be using, such as Okta, and you can leverage single sign-on right off the bat. The other big thing that Control Tower allows you and enables you as part of this whole enabling governance story is establishing guardrails. So the famous quote is, right, you don't want to be in the middle of the developer's road. You don't want to be the gatekeeper or the blocker. You want to enable them. You want to provide the guardrails. The whole idea here is we have learned from our field, we have learned from our partners, we have learned from our professional services SA team about the best practice AWS rules and things that you should be doing in your production accounts, right? And what we have done is we have taken those best practices and we are offering to those all of those to you as part of those guardrails. And some of those guardrails are mandatory, and some of those guardrails are strongly recommended or optional, but we do recommend that you enable those in order to get the right security posture. And the idea here is you don't have to spend a single minute on your day number one. You just create Control Tower. Control Tower sets up your landing zone, and it also enables some of these strongly recommended guardrail or mandatory guardrails across various accounts by default. So you do get your the right security posture right out of the gate, and then because these guardrails are also constantly monitoring, you do get continuous compliance and continuous monitoring on the various AWS accounts that are managed using Control Tower, and any violations of those policies are reported in a dashboard or CloudWatch or SNS topics. So you can take advantage of that as well. And as part of the new accounts, that's the other big pain point that we see. Developers wants to go fast. A lot of the application teams, they get frustrated because they're waiting on the security team or some centralized cloud center of excellence team to vend out a new AWS account for them. And sometimes that can take weeks, if not months. And as part of Control Tower, what we're offering you is this concept of AWS Account Factory. And that Account Factory is a self-service vending machine product using AWS Service Catalog, where you as the cloud IT admin, or you can delegate that access to the application, trusted application admins or the owners to say, whenever you need a new AWS account, here you go, here's a self-service way to create that. And every time you create that, it's always stamped out using the exact same process. That way you don't have to worry about not doing the right thing, because we have automated that using the right security baselines. So that's kind of the overall story for enabling governance. As we move forward with that, right, if you were to dive deep into what the landing zone is, when you go to your AWS console and Control Tower is right now available in 4 different regions, a couple of US East regions, US West 2, and EU West 1. So if you were to go in any one of those 4 regions, you will see an option to launch Control Tower. And when you launch that, in the 30 to 90 minutes, it's essentially going to set up a brand new AWS organization. As part of that AWS org, it's also going to set up a core OU and custom OU. It's also going to set up an AWS SSO, as I mentioned, and a SSO directory to create that single sign-on experience. And then as part of the Account Factory, it's also going to create the Service Catalog product, which is the Account Factory product, to enable the self-service AWS account creation process. In terms of the AWS org and the core OU, those who are not familiar with OU, think of organization unit as just a container to group a bunch of AWS accounts together. So just the way, in our users versus group managing policies, you always want to manage policies at a group level, not at individual user level, just as a best practice. Ease of operation, ease of maintenance. Same idea in AWS. When it comes to managing, the account policies, you want to create these containers. These are called organization units. And AWS Control Tower follows that same best practice. It creates the core OU, under which it's going to create a couple of core accounts. One is called the log archive account, and the other is called the audit account. And we're going to look into those, what they have as well. And then the custom OU is where when you need to create new AWS accounts for your developers, for the sandbox accounts, or maybe they want to create they have a new idea, they want to experiment and build a prototype or POC, and maybe it's a pre-approved budget and a pre-approved project where you want to have, okay, I want to create dev, stage, and prod, 3 different accounts. You can do all of that under custom OU, and you can use AWS Service Catalog, Account Factory product to vend those new accounts. And every time you vend it, they're all connected back with Control Tower. They all have consolidated billing enabled by default because they're part of this AWS org. All the log files for CloudTrail and CloudWatch, they will show up back, they'll travel back into the log archive account. And for auditing purposes, you will have the cross-account appropriate read-only roles created and bootstrapped in each of that new account. That way, the folks who have access to audit account can then take the necessary operational steps to audit those accounts in first 30 to 90 minutes. And that's really the kind of the using AWS Control Tower. As we move forward with that, let's moving on to the kind of the core architecture here for accounts. The whole idea is Control Tower is instantiated as part of the AWS account, which by default becomes then the AWS master account for that AWS organization. And so this is where one of the common questions that customers would have, hey, I already have my existing AWS org, I already have a bunch of AWS accounts, how does it work with Control Tower in this scenario? So as part of our current release, in order for you to take advantage of Control Tower, you do need to create a net new master account or a net new account that's not tied to AWS org, because as we saw as part of that launch workflow, Control Tower will launch a new AWS org, and it will create everything in a pristine state because it's creating everything new from scratch. So that is the current process. We do have future roadmap items where we may allow you to bring in your existing accounts and existing org, but that's something if you have further questions on, that's like NDA conversation, feel free to reach out to your account managers or us, and we'll be happy to have that further conversation. But for now, as part of the account creation, the master account is where the core OU is, AWS org is instantiated with core OU, and then audit account and log archive account is where you're going to have your centralized security / logging capabilities. Now, in terms of what that means is, in terms of your centralized identity and access management, that's done as part of AWS SSO. So every new account that gets vended out using Control Tower Account Factory will have certain roles pre-bootstrapped and pre-baked in. And this is how the auditors from the audit account can then get access to all the AWS accounts that are part of Control Tower footprint. That's achieved because there are pre-configured groups in AWS SSO that Control Tower will create, such as AWS Control Tower administrators, auditors, service catalog, end users, et cetera, right? And as part of the pre-configured permissions that Control Tower creates, it does create admin read-only and write access. So if you were to create this and just the plumbing that will go along to create this and make sure every new account that you're creating manually today will have all of this, as you can imagine, that in itself is a 3-month-long project. AWS Control Tower, and you get out-of-box AWS SSO, you get all of that functionality out-of-box natively, so you don't have to spend time on this undifferentiated heavy lifting. You get to focus on the functionality and the features that add value to your business. So if we continue to move forward, the guardrails is I think the other exciting piece from my lens. It's really, nobody wants to do the wrong thing, right? As a developers, the feedback I constantly get from them is, hey, we just want to, do things and not get yelled at by our administrators, right? And not get that slap on the wrist. And what guardrails is doing is essentially saying, instead of, back in the day when you had to communicate certain standards across your company, you would probably write a bunch of wiki pages, Word documents, maybe email those out, maybe have brown bag sessions. If you're lucky, you may have happy hours and talk about those things or pizza or whatnot. But even then, when it came to doing the right thing, developers, when they were in that moment, they did whatever they knew based on their limitation or whatever degree of knowledge they had. That's how they did things, and that may either result in a great security posture or a very poor security posture, which was completely beyond your control. And with the cloud, though, you don't have to have that old model now, right? Using AWS Control Tower, this notion of guardrails is these are your best practices. These are the policies that you get out of box enabled on all of your accounts. And so the mandatory ones will be enabled by default. The optional ones is something then you can decide as part of your operations that you want to enable them or not, right? But the idea is you have a growing list of AWS best practices, which we call the guardrails, available to you at your fingertip to be enabled as and when you need it. And you don't have to worry about how those get deployed across AWS. The current AWS accounts as well as the new AWS account that you're going to create under the Control Tower arena, right? So once you enable a guardrail, the future AWS accounts, the net new AWS accounts that you create using Control Tower Account Factory, those will also be enabled on those net new accounts. So this whole operationalizing your security best practices becomes relatively easier, or at least it's a step in the right direction for you where it's all automated on your behalf and you don't have to spend time doing at least that bit, and you can focus on doing other value-added stuff. So a key takeaway from this would be two types of guardrails, preventative ones, which are by and large SCPs, service control policies, and detective ones, which could be considered as AWS config rules. And so those, you get to enable those on OU levels. So desired policies or select organization unit you want to enable those on. So the way you would use that in production is, let's say if you can have a growing list of libraries of these guardrails, and at GA we had 23 of those. We already have added a bunch of them over last month, and we have plans to add constantly new guardrails there. So the idea would be you may have organization unit that needs to have PCI compliance, so you can enable maybe a restrictive or larger list of guardrails on that OU, versus you may have an organization unit that's strictly used for developer sandboxes, and then for that it may have lesser stringent requirement or guardrails on those, right? So that's how you can still allow the agility for developers, but then for production and non-development accounts, you can have more enforced continuous compliance using these guardrails. And everything that config rules and all these guardrails they're detecting will get reported into CloudWatch as well as SMS topics and the dashboard. So moving on to some of these guardrail examples would be simple things like, you should have MFA enabled for root account or root user. You should not have, publicly accessible S3 buckets. Now that's something that pretty much we all have had experience, and we all have, had S3 buckets like that were open at one point in time. Things like EBS encryption, you should ensure that your EBS volumes are encrypted that are attached to your EC2 instances. That's just the best practice. So instead of going to every developer who may be trying to focus on web application development or mobile application development, and they want nothing to do with EBS volumes because it's so low level in the stack, you don't have to spend the time trying to educate them on that. You can just enable these guardrails, and by default some of these things can be achieved. So that's how you can get the compliance and the agility at the same time. That's where we're going with it. Now moving forward with the next thing, which is the account provisioning process. So that's one of the biggest benefit that customers have really excited about and given us a lot of good feedback on is, hey, we just want to create these new accounts and give it to our developers, and we want to make sure every time that new account is rendered out, it has the right VPCs created, it has the right IP ranges for the CIDR blocks, and it has the right number of subnets in it, and all the low-level stuff with all the guardrails, right? And so customers have, now that we are offering them this functionality, they are using Control Tower, and AWS Service Catalog is the underlying AWS service that actually is. But the whole idea is you can have a standard blueprint, and that standard blueprint is what's used every time a new AWS account is vended or created in your footprint, in your AWS ecosystem. And that's the huge value you get right off the bat. You don't have to do a thing for it. As part of Control Tower, launching of Control Tower in that first 30 to 90 minutes, Control Tower will create that account factory as a self-service product in your service catalog. What's a service catalog? So some of you may be already familiar with it, but AWS Service Catalog is another native AWS service that has been GA for last more than 4.5 years now. And the easy way to think about that is a self-service orchestration layer, right? If anything you want to standardize, infrastructure provisioning, blueprints, 3-tier architecture, reference architectures, if you want to enforce that every time somebody invokes and needs a 3-tier application stack, it needs to have the standard blocks, building blocks, provision in a standard way, then AWS Service Catalog is that tool that you have at your disposal. So developers can use that to launch EC2 instances, RDS instances, EMR, SageMaker, anything and everything that CloudFormation has the support for can be put into Service Catalog as a self-service product. And Control Tower is following the same pattern. In this case, the self-service product happens to be a net new AWS account as opposed to a EC2 or EMR or SageMaker. So a big value here that you get right off the bat. So in the interest of time, we'll keep moving forward. Now that we have looked at the enablement portion, right, the next thing is provisioning resources, and that includes provisioning the new AWS accounts. So this is where we'll kind of dive deep, a little bit deeper on the service catalog portion. So like I was mentioning, anything that you want to allow as a self-service product in AWS, that can be basic building blocks such as EC2, RDS, EMR, or complicated stacks like a 3-tier reference architecture of how to deploy, a web application or a Java application, Node application, or a mobile application. Any of those things. And the other learning we have had from customers is, I know there's lots of options and lots of different ways to do things, but when you look at your application development team, by and large, they would have kind of standardized or at least gotten to somewhat of a more top 20 rule. They may be using different programming languages and different stacks, but if you apply the 80-20 rule, you can pretty much come up with that top 4 to 5 reference architectures, reference infrastructure architectures that they want to deploy. And what you can do is you can define those. And GoDaddy is a great example here. They are publicly referenceable customers. They've done this at scale. So as part of every AWS account that gets created, they will bootstrap every new AWS account with the most commonly requested AWS infrastructure as a self-service service catalog product, right? So this can be EC2, and you want to make sure that all the right security ports are disabled. Only the right access is allowed, EBS volumes are encrypted, and anything and everything, the right armies are used. All of that can be scripted using infrastructure as a code, blueprint, and that is considered as a product in AWS Service Catalog. And you can have multiple versions of that product, and as you go along, you can group those products into what we call portfolios, which is nothing but collection of products, and you can then allow tagging enforcement and other things on that. So if you're further interested in learning more about how do you do enablement and governance at scale for resource provisioning, I would highly recommend that you go and maybe take a look at GoDaddy's presentation from reInvent 2018 or read more about it. But as we move forward here, the next thing that the administrator would have to do, and in this case the Control Tower administrator does, is it will create that account factory as a product in your AWS Service Catalog. As the second step here would be the Service Catalog administrator can go and either add additional products in there, as we are talking about the 80-20 rule, or you know what, I'm part of the Cloud Center of Excellence team, but I have 500 different developers that I need to support. So I don't want to be in the middle of every time they need to have a new account, they come to me, and that can be a bottleneck, right? So if you want to say, I want to delegate access to this product to respective application owners or the leaders or the managers within those teams, you could give them the end user access so that every time that team needs to create a new AWS account, they can simply play this end user role and self-service and get that new AWS account created whenever they need it without ever coming back to Control Tower administrator or the Service Catalog administrators. And every time they're vending out the new account, it is vended out using the exact same blueprint, which is what you're controlling on this side. So the administrators, the Cloud IT admin gets the compliance, the security posture that they desire, because you have battle tested these templates, you have made sure everything is looking good from your lens, and the end users simply get the self-service and agility that they need. Service Catalog offers API, CLI, and console access, so they can go and use any of those 3 different options to enable and get that self-service resource provision in AWS. So with that, we'll also do a quick demo at the end if we get additional time, but let's keep moving so we can show you in action how that actually works in practice. The last piece here is the operations. So once you have laid out the foundation for your multi-account, multi-region using the automated landing zone, AWS Control Tower, and then you have provisioned the right products in the AWS Service Catalog, including the account factory, the next thing is the operationalizing your multi-account environment. And the way Control Tower helps you there is because the guardrails are constantly monitoring your environment for using both mandatory as well as the detective ones. The detective ones will detect anything that's suboptimal, that violates the policy, and it will essentially report that data out back into dashboard, as well as you can have SNS topics that can get fired on. And as part of that, you can then remediate those actions, right? So the running joke is you don't want to get paged. You just want things to get auto-fixed. Who wants to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning? I don't. So the idea here would be if you detect something that's suboptimal, you can tie that into Lambda functions and have appropriate actions taken on your environment, right? And that's the operational act piece here. As part of the auditing, I know this is a big pain for a lot of the compliance organization where they have a lot of PCI, HIPAA, and other compliance that they have to go through. So as part of the audit account that we are creating and the audit groups and access that we give you, it's very easy for you to simply provide your auditors with access to that, and they can go through their annual or periodic rituals of auditing appropriate things in those. So it makes your life super easy. And then we do have a nice dashboard where everything is reported. So if you are a visual person, you get access to this nice dashboard. You can look at how many different, and we have a dashboard coming up right here. So let's just jump into that. And I'm going to demo this as well so we can quickly take a look at that. But it gives you an idea on footprint, how many different accounts you have, how many OUs you have, how many guardrails you have enabled, things like that. So moving forward quickly to cover a few other things, so I can give it to Jonathan and we can come back for a quick demo. See here. In terms of pricing, that's my favorite part. Control Tower is free. So you only pay for the underlying AWS resources that you're creating. So as part of guardrails, we do rely heavily on config rules. So config rules have their own pricing models, so your mileage will vary on that. So depending on how many you enable, your cost will vary on that. And for AWS Service Catalog, because AWS Account Factory, the Account Factory functionality is implemented using Service Catalog, you do have to pay for that, but it's really not that expensive. Service Catalog's current pricing is $5 per active portfolio per region. So you can take a look at that using simple cost estimator tools, things like that. On the Control Tower pricing page, we do have some estimations. I think your monthly bill could go anywhere between $40 to $400. Those are some of the scenarios we had there. But again, depending on how many number of AWS accounts you have, how many guardrails you create and enable, and how many additional service catalog portfolios and products you're creating, that may, your cost will vary there. So just keep an eye on that. Now, as part of summary, in terms of just kind of closing out the presentation here from Control Tower lens, quick kind of recap, right? You get this automated landing zones, which people were investing 2 weeks to 2 months before. You get all of that in less than 30 to 90 minutes. So huge cost savings, huge time savings. You get this policy enforcement through guardrail. So you don't want to be the blocker, you want to be the enabler. You get to play that role. Account Factory for creating new AWS accounts. So you don't have to spend 2 weeks, 3 months, whatever time that it's currently taking in your organization. Account Factory can get you a new account in less than an hour. Dashboard for quick executive summary, but you do get notifications and SNS things to automate remediation actions. You do get built-in AWS SSO for single sign-on. You do get the log archive and audit accounts so that all your CloudTrail and config logs are all shipped back into a centralized account. And that's true for any new AWS account that you vend using Account Factory. So all this plumbing is always deployed as part of every new account you deploy using Control Tower. So that's a big benefit you get. It's not just one and done. You don't have to reinvest your efforts into that. You just use Control Tower, Account Factory. You will continue to get that benefit. You do have built-in monitoring and notification as part of SMS topics. And the last but not the least, we do have a complete engineering team, product management, folks like me who are out and about and talking to customers and partners. So we do have a roadmap. We do have an amazing list of functionality that customers are asking us to build. We can't build it fast enough, but that's coming all your way. So by leveraging something that is native, such as AWS Control Tower, Service Catalog, you can start to lay that foundation to achieve governance at scale, and more importantly, using self-service. So with that, I think I'm going to give it back to Jonathan.
Great. Thank you so much, Sanjay. That was an incredible dive into Control Tower, and have to say that Mission and I, we've been extremely pleased with just how complete and useful the service is, even so early on. And the fact that it's available for pretty much next to no cost it really speaks to AWS's obsession for customers, right? That's a core value of AWS's and one that we share as a partner. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about, from a partner's perspective, what Control Tower brings to the table and why Mission really finds it useful, right? So as you all know, AWS kind of completely changed how we consume IT resources. And it did that by creating a self-service, consumption-based kind of platform. And that created a lot of agility, but it also created a lot of challenges, right? And one of the most common things that we engage with customers on is when they have what I lovingly refer to as cloud sprawl, right? Because it's self-service and companies are growing quickly, often they get into a place where they're creating a lot of resources, they're provisioning new accounts, and they have a lack of clarity around what those resources are for, if they're provisioned properly, if they're applying best practices, where is the spend going, how to implement and enforce compliance requirements. And AWS really heard that feedback, and we've been delivering that feedback on behalf of customers to AWS as well. This is a common reason customers engage with us, and Control Tower doesn't just help end users kind of achieve those goals. It also helps partners to codify that, right? So as Sanjay mentioned, AWS Control Tower balances that need of kind of builders and innovators with central cloud IT, right? So it's that agility and innovation versus governance and control. And again, that's the reason that customers engage with us as a partner to help drive that balance. And what Mission has been doing is leveraging Control Tower to enable that in a more transparent, effective, and efficient way. So we implement cloud governance and security guardrails. We implement Account Factory and using AWS Service Catalog to provide that self-service kind of capability, specifically for developer sandbox accounts. That's a common use case. And we set up AWS single sign-on to best practices. This is actually, this list of things that we've done is driven out of a key customer that we're working on right now, hoping to release a case study on it soon. And you know, really ultimately, we're helping customers to leverage Control Tower to achieve those goals more quickly, right? You know, certainly businesses out there have experience and they can leverage Control Tower to achieve those goals, but Mission has engaged with hundreds of customers across dozens of verticals. So we've got a lot of experience, and we're bringing that to bear with Control Tower to kind of codify that into customer environments. So some of the key benefits from Mission's perspective is that it provides a really simple path, right? It gives the best practices AWS environment in just a few clicks, standardization for kind of across everything, including account provisioning, centralized policy management, and governance and compliance enforcement. We deal with a lot of customers in the healthcare and life sciences space, so customers who have strict compliance, HIPAA compliance kind of concerns, and other customers who have GDPR kind of restrictions. And it really helps us to enforce that on behalf of customers. And we can do it in a consultative way. I think that's the key thing here is AWS Control Tower enables us as a partner and you as a customer to templatize things and really to tailor it to your needs. It's not a pre-canned one-size-fits-all package. They have templates that you can start from, but you can kind of iterate and move things forward to really map it to your own needs. And that's something that we do at Mission actively with customers. And not only that, it's not a once and done kind of situation. We can gain peace of mind, right? I think that's that last kind of bullet there. We're able to provide continuous compliance, continuous best practice alignment, leveraging Control Tower. It's not something that you can do and then be done with it. It's something you have to actively pursue. And Control Tower gives a lot of levers and kind of guardrails and systems to implement those best practices and keep them going. And with that, you know, I'll point out that we have a data sheet attached in the attachments and links kind of section here in the webinar around mission overview, talking a little bit about who we are as a business, what we can provide, and then another one about our superpowers, right? Things that we're really strong in, specifically containers and serverless are something that we've actively been seeing. And I'll also point out that, as you can see on the slide, we're open for questions. It's rare that we have an opportunity to engage directly with the AWS service teams in this context, and I'm really excited to have that opportunity to have Sanjay on the call. So I'm actually going to read out a couple of the questions, and Sanjay, I'll let you answer. So the first one is, do I need to have a new AWS account to launch AWS Control Tower? And if so, what are the prereqs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad somebody asked that. So your journey to Control Tower begins with a new AWS account. And the key thing, as I mentioned early on, and as we walk through the entire deep diagram, is since Control Tower has to launch a new AWS organization, the account that you're using, the new account, it needs to be completely independent and standalone. So a lot of our customers will have, various contractual obligations, things like that. So I would recommend that you work with your account managers if you have one, set up that new account, kind of work with them to make sure all the processes are updated to factor that account in, and you use that new AWS account to launch Control Tower, and then really start anything that you want to do new in AWS, right? So new workloads, new teams that you want to onboard, new sandbox accounts that you want to give to those new developers. Start leveraging Control Tower for all your greenfield effort. And as we go along, we do have plans to support existing accounts as well. But that's something, if you have questions on, we're happy to engage in a future conversations.
Great, and one thing I'll point out as well is, as we've engaged with customers implementing Control Tower, obviously I said they have that kind of cloud sprawl situation. They have an existing set of accounts that they need help with. We have implemented Control Tower for them in new environments and then help them move existing kind of workloads into those environments. And that's something that a partner can definitely help you with. So feel free to reach out about that as well. So next question is, how do I bootstrap additional custom security baselines into new AWS accounts once it's vended using AWS Control Tower? Is there any guidance you have for me there?
Yeah, so no, I think that's a good one as well, so especially those who are, as your maturity and needs kind of grow in AWS, which is always a constant challenge. No matter what we provide to you, right? We can't give you a baseline through Control Tower that's going to meet every customer's, every industry segment's, every need, right? And we realize that, and we don't pretend that we're doing that, right? So the idea would be, we want to give you the best practices and this a great canvas which you can paint the way that meets your need. But then you're always going to have this additional need that we're not really having the right guardrail right now for that, or maybe you need to have additional AWS Service Catalog products, or maybe you need to have additional security things baked in. So the way you can do that, and this is where the reference architecture here would be, once you use automation from Control Tower to vend out that new account, you can keep a monitoring, and you can use event-based architecture, right? And as that event comes through, you can pipeline that event into your next workflow, and that next workflow step can be using your custom implementation or your custom processes, your custom security needs can then
Looks like we're having some technical difficulty there. Sanjay, you still there? All right. While Sanjay gets reconnected, I'm going to go ahead and read out a couple more of these questions. So what can be done to provide additional self-service capabilities to developers as part of new AWS accounts? And I think this is actually a key area where Control Tower excels. So as I mentioned in kind of our slide section on case study that we've been working with customers on, one of the key use cases we have for Control Tower for our customers is to provide that self-service capability for developers to deploy new sandbox accounts underneath their kind of master pair, right? And that ensures that developers have the access to quickly innovate, test, develop, and do so within kind of the best practices and policies of the organization. Sanjay, are you back?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to move on to the next question. What are different ways in which I can get further help from AWS if my organization is interested in trying out AWS Control Tower?
That's a great question, and I think that I'll also flip to the next slide here, which is, so typically, if you have any further questions, I would say reach out to AWS CT-BD, so that's the email alias for my team. So good news is I'm not the only person who knows about this. There's a ton of my colleagues who are based in different geographies, and no matter where you're located, and no matter when you're listening to this webinar, you can always reach out to that email alias from AWS Lens. If you know your account manager, feel free to CC them as well. And then the idea would be we can reach back to you and give you the necessary help. We do offer complimentary hands-on workshops. We come to your site. We get your team up and running with it. We also work with experts such as Mission Cloud. The most thing I like about them is they're 100% AWS focused, so they have ton of insight, ton of expertise. They work closely with us, so we get to engage partners' help when we need as well, right? So definitely for all the AWS questions, feel free to reach out to us. Jonathan, you probably want to, for all the mission stuff, I think you probably want to reach out to Mission Cloud.
Absolutely. Good. Thanks for sharing that. And yes, agreed. You can definitely reach out to both AWS and Mission. We're happy to help you however we can. And let's go to the next question here. There's two questions here that I think we'll tackle at the same time, and it's really about the relationship between Control Tower and landing zones, and kind of unpacking the relationship there and how they live together in the same org. Is there any migration path from landing zones to Control Tower? I think that one is, we can provide a little bit more explanation about how landing zone relates. And then, does landing zone support master with 3 core accounts but Control Tower not all 3? I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Maybe Sanjay, you'll take a crack on that?
Yeah, sure. So good question. Overall, as I mentioned, landing zone was something that came on early on the timeline, and that needed a bunch of efforts for you to implement that. We gave you reference architecture, but you had to spend the efforts to build it. Control Tower is an automated way to build the landing zone, and there's no right or wrong answer. You know, if you have ton of customization needs and you want to do super customized operation, and then maybe you still want to continue to look at the old landing zone solution, right? But if you are okay with, and if your needs can be met with what we are offering you as part of the Control Tower landing zone, then our guidance is you start with Control Tower, and as we go along on the timeline, you know, we're going to give you more customization, out-of-box customization capabilities in Control Tower, so you can continue to leverage that. So I would say Control Tower is what I would lean on by default, and then if that doesn't meet the need, then I'll look elsewhere. And in terms of the core number of accounts, so Control Tower as of now offers the log archive and audit as the 2 core accounts. But we do have future plans, but that's in future. So for now, I think the answer is the 2 core accounts we support is log archive and audit.
Great. And the last question, I think I know the answer on this, but any ETA on when we can integrate existing accounts to Control Tower?
Yeah, so we do have plans for that, but I think all the timelines and stuff, we can talk about it. Maybe, you know, if you have future questions, maybe you reach out to us and we can probably get to you and have a dedicated product roadmap conversation where we can not only talk about the individual functionality like existing accounts, but existing org, things like that. Definitely reach out to us and we can set up a dedicated hour with you to go over the product roadmap.
Great. So Sanjay, we're actually running short on time here. I think we have like 3 minutes left before the webinar platform is going to call it a day on us. So I don't think we'll have time for a demo, but we do have time for one more question, which I do see here in Control Tower. Where does the billing master account actually reside?
Yeah, so the billing master account is the Control Tower account, which you will use. So the first account, right, your journey to Control Tower will start with a net new AWS account, and that inherently becomes your master pair account. All the other core accounts, as well as the custom account that you're going to vend out using Account Factory, will be linked to your master pair account for the virtue of consolidated billing. So that happens by default. So the master account and the Control Tower master, the billing master is the same account.
Great. Well, thank you for that answer. And with that, we have about a minute left. So I think we should wrap up. I'm going to say thank you so much to Sanjay for taking the time. This has been extremely informative. We got lots of great questions from the audience, so thank you all for attending. Quick notes. We will have this webinar uploaded to YouTube shortly, so keep an eye out on Mission Cloud on Twitter, and we'll post it there so you can see. In addition, it should be available here on Bright Talk. A reminder, there are some attachments and links on the webinar. You can click down there to see a data sheet on who Mission is and our superpowers. And a reminder there as well, you can see the 2 emails that you can contact either Mission or AWS or both. And we'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for attending. Appreciate it again, Sanjay, and look forward to doing this again sometime.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Next time, hopefully, we'll get time to do the demo as well. So until then, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.